All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the IGSHPA July Town Hall. I'm Jeff Hammond, Executive Director of the International Ground Source Heat Pump Association. We're thrilled to have you this morning, and we have an exciting topic with Arlene Anderson from DOE's Geothermal Technologies Office. In fact, DOE, the EERE office, is sponsoring this conference. We sincerely appreciate that. Before we turn it over to Arlene, I have just a few updates so that you can have the latest on what's going on with IGSHPA. So we'll get started with that, with the latest IGSHPA news. Just to let you know, with this town hall and our Dig Deeper webinars, there's a spot on the website, IGSHPA.org. If you go to the events and training menu, you'll see all of the latest Dig Deepers and town hall webinars. We do have all of the 2023 Town Hall and Dig Deeper webinars with speakers, but feel free to submit an abstract if you'd like to speak in 2024. That's available now. And so go ahead and do that if you have a topic that you think would be of interest to members. Likewise, we still have openings for sponsors for our Town Hall and Dig Deeper webinars. As you can see from the title slide, DOE's GTO office sponsored this webinar. Since these are recorded, they stay as long as they're online. So it's a good investment to sponsor these webinars since you'll see your logo each time somebody plays that video. Good news on the 2023 conference in Las Vegas. It's up and live registration. You just go to IGSHPA.org and click on the conference information. We've already had quite a few exhibitors reserve space. So if you're planning on exhibiting, you'll want to look at that pretty quickly. Same with sponsorship and advertising opportunities. Those are filling up quickly as well. So check that out at IGSHPA.org. Speaking of sponsors, we've had great response this year. We only have one bronze sponsor, one silver sponsor, and one diamond sponsor left. All the others are already taken. And we very much appreciate all of our sponsors. We certainly couldn't do it without them. And this just really shows the dedication to the industry. So we certainly appreciate that sponsorship and support of IGSHPA. You can see here the list of sponsors exhibitors already. It's filling up very quickly as well. Quite a few 20 by 20 booths this year. There's still a lot of 10 by 10 and 10 by 20 available. In fact, any of these 10 by 10 booths can be combined into other configurations. So we can do a 10 by 20, we can do a 20 by 20, we can do whatever we need to do there with those booths. As far as advertising opportunities, there are still quarter, half, and full page ads available. Those ads go in the conference program guide. And so anybody who attends the conference will get one of these conference program guides, and it'll also be in a PDF online. So you'll have an opportunity to have your sponsorship available long term. As far as conference presenters, we were accepting abstracts for the conference up to the end of May. And we are, I believe all of the speakers have been notified now. So we're working on that final agenda, which will be on our website here in the next week or so. It's amazing the number of speakers that sent abstracts this year. We ended up with 11 different tracks, 4 per day, and we have 49 workshops, 3 panel discussions, and the annual general meeting, as well as the leadership address. So even more than last year. We did add some breaks in between based upon our comments from last year's conference. So it won't be quite as wild going from one to the next. You'll have a little bit of time in between this year. Also, the next research conference is well on its way. We are accepting abstracts for the research conference until September 18th. And then authors will be notified starting October 1st. And at that point, the abstracts that are selected will be able to submit papers. The next research conference is in Montreal, and it is in May in Montreal, so it should be very nice weather. Check that out at IGSHPA.org as well if you're interested in the research conference. We have heard that some people are not getting our IGSHPA news, or they might be going into the junk mail or spam. So just a quick tip here. If you're using Outlook, if you add us to your address book, it's a lot less likely that that email is going to go to junk or spam. For Windows, just right-click on the email address and add to Outlook contacts. On the Mac, you can right-click, or you can click Control, open Outlook contact, and add to contacts. So if you haven't done that, you may want to go ahead and add the info@igshpa.org address to your contacts. That way it's less likely to go into junk. If you're looking for CEUs for this town hall or dig deeper, just make sure you send in the chat message your email address as well as your name, and we'll keep track of those with certificates sent at every half CEU interval. So this would be for your certification renewals, the town halls, and the dig deepers count towards that goal. A little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll be ready for Arlene. Just make sure any questions that you have, you type into chat. At the end of Arlene's presentation, I will be reading those questions and allow time for Arlene to respond. And if we don't get to your questions, then we'll do our best to get back to you. We'll have a list of questions for Arlene, and then we can respond to you directly. If you would, as a courtesy to other attendees, please mute your microphone unless you're speaking. And note that this session is recorded. So anything that you might have missed or you want to go back and look at, usually that recording is online within a couple of days. So by the end of the week, if you go to igshpa.org, at the very top of the page, you'll see a YouTube icon. Simply click on there and you'll find the July Town Hall in that recording. Just one other slide here, our disclaimer and potential conflict of interest. The upcoming presentation represents the opinion of the presenter and does not represent any official position, opinion, or endorsement of any products or services by IGSHPA or its members. IGSHPA town halls and dig deeper webinars are for member updates and education on the latest information in the geothermal heat pump industry and are not meant to endorse one technology or brand over another. It is a presenter's responsibility to disclose any conflict of interest or position that may arise in the content of the webinar. All right, with that, let me read a little bit about our speaker. We're thrilled to have Arlene Anderson. Arlene is the lead technology manager within the U.S. Department of Energy Geothermal Technologies Office, or GTO, low temperature program. Most recently, Arlene led the development of a community geothermal heating and cooling design and deployment funding opportunity, a groundbreaking initiative of the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy that also addresses near-term fuel supply concerns of underserved communities in the U.S. Several other of her initiatives include work with the International Geothermal Association, IGA, Heat Experts Group to improve low temperature geothermal system definitions and update heating and cooling dataset standards for IGA data collection and the World Geothermal Congress's country updates. Stewarding the US DOE Geothermal Data Repository, a public-facing home to more than 1,300 of GTO's project data submissions, accessed daily by hundreds of organizations with over 3 million downloads to date. With a Bachelor of Science from the Pennsylvania State University, College of Earth and Mineral Sciences, and a master's from the University of Virginia School of Architecture, Arlene brings a broad, multidisciplinary approach to geothermal energy development. She also completed the IGSHPA Certified Geothermal Designer and Geothermal Inspector training programs. And thanks again for DOE's sponsorship of this webinar. At that, I'm going to do a quick changeover here with Arlene's presentation and turn it over to her. Let me go to view full screen mode here quickly. All right, thank you so much, Arlene. If you'll let me know when you want to go to the next slide, we're in good shape.
That's great, Jeff. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining this morning. My presentation is going to include an overview of the low temperature program initiatives, two of them in particular, and they are focused on ground source heat pumps. So I'm very excited to be sharing this with you. Again, thanks for this forum. It's really great to have so many folks in this industry to talk with. Also, I just want to mention before you go to the next one, sorry, Jeff, that the the two areas, the first one's going to be our recent awards that we're making. They are currently under negotiation. And so I'll spend most of the time this morning talking about that, the community geothermal heating and cooling design and deployment projects, which you see here on the screen. But then I'll also spend toward the end, if we have time, a little time discussing some of our international projects in the low temperature space. All right, thanks, Jeff. Next one. So this community geothermal initiative, we thought about, well, what do communities need? You know, what's the problem? What are we doing here? This is a community-focused solution to building sector decarbonization. And, you know, when I'm presenting, sometimes it's not to geothermal experts or folks like you. So, you know, we're really explaining what the benefits of geothermal are. But I know a lot of you already know that. But, you know, let me say that, you know, this is what it's about. This is communities needing clean energy. They need cost reductions and upskilling to meet this growing demand for ground source heating and cooling designers, installers, and even operation and maintenance, especially when we get into these community systems. So these solutions that this initiative is bringing forward, we hope, is to benefit communities. And in so doing, we achieve, you know, the geothermal heating and cooling deployment and a great deal of community benefit. So you can see here, these are just some of the solutions that we're trying to work on. And especially this initiative is also focused on developing that workforce training and some apprenticeship opportunities in the geothermal HVAC trades. Next one. So the general overarching goal of this funding opportunity was shown here, to support the formation of U.S. community coalitions that will develop, design, and install community geothermal heating and cooling systems that supply at least 25% of that overall community heating or heating and cooling demand in communities where the current fuel used to heat and cool homes and or businesses results in increased greenhouse gas emissions. So the awards that I'm going to be talking about are in 11 community geothermal coalitions across 10 states. The 5 specific goals of the funding opportunity are to deploy new or retrofitted systems, identify environmental issues, and that could be in a host of areas, but for underserved and disadvantaged communities, assist with workforce transition, develop case studies, and publish the data and information. The projects will represent the first of 2 phases in a $13 million initiative to support design and the eventual deployment. Okay, next one. As part of this initiative, we required that there be 4 roles filled for each community geothermal coalition. And it could be filled by 1 entity or more, but each of these roles must be part of the coalition. The first being the community voice, and that would be that entity would need to understand and communicate the needs of the community. That's a big ask. 2, the analysis and design entity, who it would model and design that geothermal district heating and cooling system. 3, the workforce entity that would be responsible for developing and implementing training and apprenticeships. And 4, a deployment entity to obtain the permits and build. And this initiative, after we launched it, was also selected to be part of the DOE's Justice 40 initiative, where 40% of the overall benefits would flow to a disadvantaged communities. And that, you might ask, well, what is a disadvantaged community? Generally, those communities, members who are marginalized, underserved in some way, or overburdened by pollution. That's important. There's also different tools that we can use to put in certain data that will determine whether it's a disadvantaged community or not. And again, it wasn't a 100% requirement, but in line with the Justice 40 initiative, we're looking at least 40% of those overall benefits heading in that direction. Next slide. The technology space, most of you are probably familiar with this concept where we're looking at district geothermal heating and cooling. The proposals, the applications did not have to be district, but we recognize that the more advanced district energy systems are heading in that direction when you look at a community system, for example. So we were encouraging more innovation in that area and looking also at urban, suburban, rural, remote communities and a range of system sizes, technologies, and geographies. So we would have some different case studies to look at how the communities across the US would implement their systems. The eligibility criteria could have included, geothermal direct use, heat pumps, or like I mentioned, innovative designs in this area of district geothermal. And it could include hybrid technologies, perhaps, PV solar or thermal energy storage that help perhaps lower the cost or provide some other benefit to the geothermal system. Next slide. This just shows the timeline for the projects presented today. That first budget period is really what we're focused on, and that's planning and design. The coalitions would design that community scale geothermal heating and cooling system. And I say coalitions because the coalition formation and the focus on community was rated very heavily in this area. So the designer works closely with those coalitions and with the community to design the system. And then to finalize that location and the footprint, look at that resource and the permitting needs. What is the planned use and is it feasible? And identifying in parallel, what are the workforce and training development needs? And then following a competitive down selection of these projects that I'll be talking about in budget period 2, that's where the deployment would take place. So, and conducting those workforce training activities. Next slide. A little bit about the Department of Energy and the Geothermal Technologies Office project management approach. So we don't talk a lot about that. It's a little bit boring, but I wanted to at least bring that into this discussion a little bit, into the town hall. It's paralleling some of the criteria that we use to evaluate the applications, but we're looking at managing this work from the perspective of looking at the coalition and resources that are part of the project. So for example, does the broader community support the project? Are the coalition leaders qualified in terms of the time that they're committing? Is there going to be a facilitation and expediting that further development of the technology? The second area we're focused on in managing the work is the planning, the community research, and data. So, and eventually getting those case studies in these areas, and eventually looking at what is the workforce strategy here? And what are the baseline conditions? A tough thing to look at. So, things like what kind of greenhouse gas emissions were being generated? What kind of fuel was used? Electricity? Or are there environmental contaminants there that would be improved upon to benefit the community? And then targeting those needs and distribution channels. And also looking at the regulation codes and standards that are going to be needed to move forward in that next budget period. Next slide. So more along the lines of how we actively manage these projects, we're wanting to look at increasing the geothermal district heating and cooling innovation and impact across the US. So currently looking at what is that state of the community energy system, are there systems, and moving from what that's like in the community to advancing that. And that includes the workforce skills again. So overall, looking at moving from a lesser resources to greater resources, and also looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is different than community benefit. It's different than, a disadvantaged community. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is just looking at ways to incorporate differences in the work that's being done. Next slide. This is a nice map that my colleague Lindsay Morris developed. And this is showing where the projects are that were selected for negotiations. You can see these 11 projects, 2 in Alaska as well as the continental US. And that represents 60 partners total across the US. Next. So again, a little bit more detail now going into those projects. This is again for phase 1 planning and design. We'll be talking about the urban and suburban communities. So those selected include Ann Arbor, Michigan, led by the city of Ann Arbor, Chicago, led by Blacks in Green, Duluth, led by the city of Duluth, a project in Framingham, Mass, led by Home Energy Efficiency Team, a project in New York City, led by Electric Power Research Institute, and then one in Wellington, led by the Connecticut Department of Environmental Energy and Environmental Protection. These are what we would call urban and suburban. They have, for the most part, populations of greater than 10,000 as defined by the US Census Bureau. Next slide, we can look at the rural communities. Selected was one in Carbondale, Colorado, led by Clean Energy Economy for the Region, a nonprofit. And the next one in Heinsberg, Vermont, being led by GTI Energy. Seward, Alaska, led by the city of Seward, and Shawnee, Oklahoma, led by University of Oklahoma. I believe that is our only academic institution leading a project. For the most part, they're cities or a nonprofit. And one remote project was selected for negotiation, and that's in Nome, Alaska. Next slide. So now I'm just going to give you an idea of what this broader coalition is shaping up to look like. Again, as I said, we're still in negotiations. It might not look like this in the very, very final approved moving forward project, but so far this is a general idea of what they're looking like. So in Ann Arbor, it's the Bryant community, and they're looking at a district geothermal design and deploying to low-income neighborhoods, maybe pairing with rooftop solar battery storage to heat and cool about 262 homes, an elementary school, a community center, and a mental health facility, and a public works site. You can see on the right, these are those 4 roles I mentioned earlier, and who will be leading those roles. For example, the city's the lead, but community voice. You also have the city. They have a community action network, and I'll just let you kind of look at these. I won't go into a lot of detail about who's who, just to give you an idea. And here's the analysis design entities. I see IGSHPA, congratulations, is part of this one. And also the Michigan Geothermal Energy Association. We have some workforce partners on this one, local unions, and IGSHPA again. And then a deployment partner, Midwest Geo and Michigan Energy Services. So that's just the first one out of 11. Next slide. I'll probably speed up a little bit. I won't go into a lot of detail again. This is the Chicago project in West Woodland. They're looking at 4 city blocks with more than 100 multifamily and single family residential buildings. Here's your lead, your community voice, the analysis design leads, and our workforce and deployment. Next. Framingham, Mass, the Concord Street Loop. They're looking at expanding this loop adjacent to another system you might have read about in the news that just actually broke ground. So this is another system adjacent to what will be an existing system led by Heat, and the community voice is the city. Analysis and design, CDM Smith, Eversource, Workforce Heat, and deployment Eversource. Next. Wallingford, Connecticut, in the Old Bridge community. This is the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection leading the award. They're looking at serving at least 50% of their heating and cooling load in this 132 unit affordable housing complex. Oh, sorry, let me just say, we also have in the workforce side for this one, pretty much like new, I'm going to say new, correct me if I'm wrong, the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships. To my knowledge, they've worked very heavily in the air source heat pump area. So it's great to have them join as a coalition member in the workforce. And they have a lot of experience now in the Northeast deploying air source heat pumps. Next one. Our rural partner in Carbondale, Colorado. This is led by Clean Energy Economy for the region. And they're looking to support a net zero energy district and provide that heat and cooling to school district offices, a library, a high school, a center for nonprofits, and there are townhomes as well. And for analysis, we've got the National Renewable Energy Lab this time, and a workforce partner and a deployment partner. Next. Rural Vermont, we have a project which is the lead is GTI Energy. And there's a good participation here in community. We've got Vermont Gas, Champlain Housing Trust, the Neighbor Works of Western Vermont, Efficiency Vermont, Heat, and Same Planet, all looking to see, what's needed in this community. We need some affordable housing. We need geothermal heating and cooling. And so there is a good emphasis on workforce training for this one as well from Vermont Gas Systems, having a lot of expertise in geothermal systems. Next. Another rural partner is in Seward, Alaska. And this one is different in innovation in terms of looking at a CO2 heat pump system to meet nearly all the heating demand for half of their municipal buildings. So this is a technology they've been interested in for a while and trying to put that together in a community system in partnership with the city and their design partners and the Workforce Alaska Vocational Tech Center. Okay, next one. Shawnee, Oklahoma is led by University of Oklahoma, and they're representing the citizen Potawatomi Nation, wanting to retrofit some existing tribal community uses to supply 50% of that heating and cooling load through a district solar geothermal heating and cooling system. They have a number of workforce partners in the coalition and deployment partners as well. Next one. And this was the only remote application that was selected for negotiation. It's Pilgrim Hot Springs in Nome, Alaska. And they're looking at both a direct use geothermal district scale system that would provide that heating and hot water to buildings, and also some cooling for food storage areas. And we have Power Rack Inc. as the lead, also as the community voice, also participating in workforce development and deployment. So they're doing a lot on this team. We also have the National Renewable Energy Labs, Cold Climate Housing Research Center, and Deerstone Consulting working here. Thanks. I think that's it for the projects that will be funding under the Community Geothermal Heating and Cooling Design and Deployment Initiative, Phase 1. And that Phase 1 lasts for 1 year again. And then a down selection will occur to move on to the deployment stage, where there will be the actual construction to move ahead. So I'll wait till the end to take questions. So let me move. I'm going to check the time. How am I doing, Jeff? Yeah.
We have it's right at 11 Central, noon Eastern.
Okay, great. So I'm going to move into some of our international projects that we're working on. And this is an initiative called, next slide, Geothermica. And this is primarily the DOE national labs working in partnership with other countries through cooperative research and development agreements, which, working with other countries is sometimes difficult, but not impossible to put in place. So instituting this formal collaboration with other countries. And, I know IGSHPA is doing that with your research conferences. That's just great. The one that Jeff mentioned at the beginning that's coming up, I think in Canada. So this as well, these Geothermica projects are partnerships teaming with other countries. So in addition to the lab partners that you see here, there's a host of other partners from the countries working on these projects. And so I'll just go briefly. That first one is called VESTA, and that's led by Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, at least the part that the US is contributing to. And for the most part, many of these are looking at analytical tools to provide technical assistance to those working on the teams, the geothermal project teams. So looking at, for example, a test bed here, making thermal energy storage commercial and technically viable. That next one, referred to as Flex Enabler, is the National Renewable Energy Lab. And they're also looking at demonstrating the coupling of heat pumps with thermal energy storage. The third one here is the Pacific Northwest National Lab. They're looking more at thermal energy storage. And lastly, for the thermal energy storage, the change, that is Oak Ridge National Lab and NREL, looking to support development and the geothermal fifth generation systems. And again, like I said, these are all international. I'm happy to provide more detail on which country partners are involved if folks would like to know that as a follow-up. Next slide are the remaining projects. These are not specifically thermal energy storage. We've got one that's a geothermal-based optimization tool that Lawrence Berkeley National Lab's working on. And again, the subsurface modeling for greater than, say, 300-meter depth, and looking at different information, so for different scales of geothermal system development. This one, Galleries to Calories, Lawrence Berkeley as well. They ultimately would like to see a field test site where they're looking at the hydraulic and heat transport characteristics of legacy mine workings. So investigating that through injection and extraction of boreholes at 2 different locations within the mine. And lastly, we have the National Energy Technology Lab. These folks are out of Morgantown, West Virginia, and Pittsburgh. We're working on what they're saying is the 4th generation. And they do list that this one is in Limerick, Ireland. And so they're looking at a target source of groundwater and aiming at extracting heat from the river and its associated estuary. And they would then strive to use the excess energy from the grid to power heat pumps, and studying the energy storage solutions as well, which is a theme here in these international partnerships. So again, these are cooperative research and development agreements. It took a while to get them in place. They're just getting off the ground. We do have one of them where the U.S. Geological Survey is also partnering through a separate agreement. And yeah, so we're glad they're getting moving. They're getting going. We should see some results as they get moving, and be to update the group at some point. Next slide. So I want to close with a few mentions here. If you're interested in getting more information, please subscribe to our drill down newsletter. And that's where you sign up as the geothermal.energy.gov. And also, if you are interested in serving as a merit reviewer for many of the competitive projects, like the 11 that I just talked about, competed, it's challenging finding merit reviewers who don't have conflicts, who have the time and energy to devote their pretty intensive processes, reviewing proposals and scoring them. If you're interested, please send us your resume to the doe.geothermal@ee.doe.gov. So that's all I have. I wanted to leave time for some questions, if any. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Arlene. That's amazing how much is going on. I'm just thrilled to see what GTO is doing. And we already have some questions. So please type your questions in the chat. We'll get started with Jack's. Jack says, question for Arlene, are schools included in the initiative, the anchor tenant concept, using K-12 schools as the lead tenant for the school? And since this demographic usually has schools that are less than perfect, doing a school has more of an emission benefit than, say, an electric school bus, and the ground loop can service the surrounding communities. Is there a program? Oh, sorry, I guess that's his question. Can you comment on that?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, Jack. Thanks for the question. Yes, it was up to the applicant to decide whether they were going to include a school, and the schools were completely, encouraged as part of the community. And I think we do have several that include schools in them. I'd have to go back through and look at them. I think Carbondale comes to mind, but there are definitely schools as part of the geothermal coalitions that we funded. And then, yeah, I see what you mean about the anchor tenant concept. We'll see as these teams design and work with the community to understand what the needs are. But yes, we do. Thank you.
Very exciting. Jack has another question. Is there a program to judge the success of each of these systems in place?
Well, we hope the case studies will get at that, Jack, where we are asking, even though the projects would not be down selected in this first phase for that design, I'm sorry, for that deployment, we're asking that the teams begin their case studies, begin thinking about what it is they're achieving in a number of areas. So we want that to even occur in the design phase. So we won't ultimately know until the down selection, the construction, the operation, if they succeed. From, I think, the perspective that you're asking, will they succeed in eventually heating and cooling the communities and the benefits provided? At that first phase, I think some of the metrics that we're looking at, certainly the department's Justice 40 initiative and economic diversity group are looking at how successful were we in engaging the community. So we're really going to be looking at those metrics carefully, and how successful were we at developing a workforce strategy, targeting programs. So you might want to ask IGSHPA for the couple projects they're involved in, how they're going to help track those metrics for success. But I think the case studies and requiring that data to be submitted and compared. There's also that requirement to upload the data to the US DOE geothermal data repository. So that will be a way of public, that will be public facing and a way to track that progress and those benefits.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Arlene.
Sure.
Kevin has a question referencing community energy networks and thermal energy networks. He says, seems that the number doubles every 4 or 5 years, my guess. These projects need to include more with a variety of heat sinks for and thermal renewable, including seasonal. Don't worry, drilling folks, they will never overshadow GeoExchange. Almost no projects mid-Atlantic, New Jersey south to the Carolinas, which should be perfect for projects given the climate and density. And he congratulates you and IGSHPA on the presentation. Any comments on that?
I'm not sure I got the question and all that. What is the question?
I think he's asking about projects in the mid-Atlantic, where the climate is well suited for that. He's asking about a variety of projects that include a variety of heat sinks and thermal renewable applications.
There are some in the mid-Atlantic. Let me see. Well, no, if you're looking at New Jersey and south to the Carolinas, there were none in this batch. If highly meritorious projects, which we received a lot. I can't exactly say how many, but we received many more highly meritorious projects than we had funding for. I guess that's good news. It's disappointing in the sense that I wish we had more funds to fund all the ones that were meritorious. We have quite a number of alternates that if we received additional funds, we'll be able to fund. And I'm not, because it's a procurement related question, I'm not able to say if any of those ones that we didn't select were meritorious and if they were mid-Atlantic projects. It's possible, but I'm looking at that now. I don't think we have mid-Atlantic projects in this group of 11.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Steve has a question. Will installation costs be provided, possibly broken out by building the HVAC system, drilling and header costs for these 11 projects? Costs are a major constraint and are rarely known. Note research, ASHRAE 1217 table 2.3 has shown header costs are approximately the same as drilling costs for larger systems. Any thoughts on cost breakdown?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. That's a very good question. The system design, what we ask is, unless it's some type of proprietary information, which we need to vet that through our legal team in order for that team to keep the information private, it would be uploaded to the DOE Geothermal repository, meaning if they have cost data that they could provide as part of that design, they would upload it. So that would still be part of that negotiation that we're in now. Will they make data public that has to do with design costs? But that's a really good suggestion for, as we move forward, asking them to break it out in this manner. We haven't required the design data to be broken out in a specific manner. But yeah, that's a great idea to suggest it be comparable. We're hoping that the case studies can do that to some extent. So thanks for the question, Steve. I'll keep that in mind.
More data is good when it comes to this kind of stuff, for sure. Victor has a question. What is the status of National Subsurface Database, in parentheses, undisturbed ground temperature, thermal conductivity, et cetera, for early ground heat exchanger design? How is GTO helping connect our GSHP community with enhanced geothermal and, I guess it's this is a second question, enhanced geothermal and oil and gas resources on this? So first question about the database, second question about oil and gas resources.
So if there's something specific called a National Subsurface Database, I'm not aware of what that is. So I don't know. What is the status of National Subsurface Database? I don't know. That's not a question I can answer. Our US DOE Geothermal Data Repository is requiring that any work we fund submits the data. So, if there's a undisturbed ground temperature or thermal conductivity test data, we would be asking that they upload that to the DOE Geothermal Data Repository. Jeff mentioned that as part of my bio, that I'm also helping steward that information and making sure our funded partners reserve money in their budgets to structure the data so that it can be reused and useful for others. So if there is some TC data coming in, we would like to have that. But I don't know what the National Subsurface data is. sorry, someone else in our office might. How is GTO helping connect the GHP community within enhanced geothermal and oil? My colleagues are definitely working in that area very hard. There's been some big initiatives. If you read the drill down, you'll see those, how we're working with enhanced geothermal and oil and gas. There's a lot of effort. Since it's not my area, I can't just tell you exactly what it is, but please take a look at the drill down and attend our webinar. There's a lot of information about how we're doing that.
Great. GTO's help is certainly appreciated. We need more stakeholders at this point as the industry grows.
I mean, in terms of, let me just go back to that though, but in terms of connecting, I mean, one big thing I've seen happen, and that's in part due to you guys, the industry, you're coming together in your various conferences, from geothermal rising to, I think there was IGSHPA participants, members who went to the geothermal rising conference and that are now even on the board, and vice versa. So seeing that happen in my time in geothermal has been really great. And that's where a lot of that cross communication seems to be occurring at the conferences. And we are helping through the sponsorship of both, or participation or funding of projects that do that. Also, when you look at enhanced geothermal systems, for example, the deep direct juice work that's happening at Cornell and West Virginia University, that is a crosscut between ground source heating and cooling and power. So at Cornell, for example, where they can use that heat for community geothermal heating and cooling, they'll do that. And where they can use it for power, they'll try to do that. So there are crossovers when you start looking at enhanced geothermal, and we are doing everything we can to get the most heat out of that system when we're funding our work. I hope that answers.
Thank you. Yufeng has a question here. Thanks for the updates on current projects. Is there any updated insights available to be shared on DOE strategies for future development on low temperature geothermal, including GSHP, in addition to GeoVision?
Hi, Yufeng. Future developments. You're talking about future budgets like fiscal year 24, which isn't something that I'm able to comment on since it's not public, but once that congressional budgets get adopted, then that'll be out for public review. So I can't really say what Congress is going to do in the future for funding our office. In terms of the projects I presented, I can say, that budget period 2, we're looking at moving on to the deployment. So that's, I don't know if that's far enough into the future for your question, but for me, that's what's next. That's the out years. We're hoping that these systems get constructed, operated, maintained, that training gets put into place, that there's workforce that's starting to evolve as a result of this community geothermal heating and cooling. So I'm pretty focused on that. My program manager, Alexis McKittrick, is looking at our strategies. And if there is something to share, the best place to find out would be at those quarterly webinars that we have to look at some of the future initiatives. And yeah, we are including low temperature geothermal in everything we're doing. So hopefully that'll be a future component as well.
Excellent. We have another question from Jack. Have there been at least 4 studies by a national, I'm sorry, he makes a statement here. There have been at least 4 studies by national labs that point to the value of GHPs. Are they ever reviewed to support a greater funding of this technology?
I think they have been. I mean, it's not maybe as much as we would hope for, but coming out of the pandemic, resources are hard to come by. But we definitely have increased our budget in the low temperature space. This $13 million for the Community Geothermal Heating and Cooling Initiative was new. And I would like to think that some of that analysis that we put out is behind why it makes sense. But it also, I think is because the industry, because IGSHPA and GeoExchange have been doing such a great job showing what the value is, what the benefit is. You're out there communicating, thanks to GeoExchange and IGSHPA. So not just the national lab studies, but what you guys are doing, I think is supporting greater funding. There's also the funding that's come under these larger initiatives, like IRA for I might be getting the Defense Production Act for heat pump manufacturing. So, I mean, and that's huge. It's a little bit out of my area. I'm not focused on that specifically, but enough up to speed on it to know that, that's a huge initiative. If heat pump manufacturers are ready to take advantage of this opportunity, there's a lot of great funds to look at expanding manufacturing capabilities for heat pumps. So that's, who knows, your question, was it the lab studies that contributed to that? Was it industry? Who knows? But it's happening. There's more funding out there than ever for folks to take advantage of. And also, the IRA tax incentives are out there now. So it's great. Thanks for the question.
Excellent. Yeah, the stars are aligned for our industry. I don't have any more questions, Arlene. Do you have any last minute thoughts? We still have a few minutes left.
No, I'm just really, really thankful that we have this forum. The town halls are great, and the deep dives coming up. Hopefully, we're going to be able to go into a little more detail at one of the upcoming deep dives on some beneficial electrification results that do go beyond the GeoVision. So we're looking forward to that. And just staying in touch, just very appreciative that we're able to have this dialogue. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Arlene, and thank you to GTO for the sponsorship. We certainly appreciate it. This has been a wonderful experience and lots of great information. This webinar has been recorded, and you'll find it at the YouTube icon at the very top of the IGSHPA homepage, IGSHPA.org. So join us for the next town hall and dig deeper, and we certainly appreciate your participation. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day. See ya.
You too.